Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how is it going?
It's going great. We just recorded our Patreon-only bonus show and had the revelation that you do a slight variation on that intro every time we do the Patreon show, but nowhere else. So if you want to know which one word Tony says every time differently, you have to subscribe at patreon.com/Buckeye Weekly. Tony, how are you?
I'm good. That's a very good sell job on that, Tom. I appreciate that. Well worth the price to find out exactly what word I say and how I say it differently. So thank you all for joining us. Tom, there's a game happening this week. As far as we know, Ohio State traveling to Michigan State. It is still on. All systems are go. Ryan Day, of course, will not be there. He is still at home dealing with the coronavirus, although he said on his radio show today he's fine, or resting comfortably, as they say, which I don't know when that became like the phrase of, I'm doing well. Like, how are you doing? He's resting comfortably. Because here's the thing, and I don't want to get too dark. That can go from totally fine to, and not in relation to Ryan Day, but when you say somebody is resting comfortably, that could be hospice. That could be he's taking a nap. He had too much to drink. Like, oh, they're resting comfortably. That is a wide range. So I don't think we should just use it as this thing that we say. Don't say resting comfortably, because for one, do you want your head coach resting a lot? Shouldn't they be working? Even if they're working from home, you don't want them to be like, you know what? I'm just going to relax. I'll let Larry handle things, and then I'll find out how it went tomorrow. So Day is doing fine, resting comfortably. Tom, your thoughts on how Ohio State can possibly win without their head coach when they have never won a game that Ryan Day has been the head coach of that he has not been in attendance for.
That's the kind of history you can't just overlook, because there's a long track record, such as what about the time with the or how about and who could forget? I do like the fact that the idea that Ryan Day is resting comfortably, like he's just kind of laying around, just like watching I Love Lucy reruns, like, it's Michigan State. And what could possibly go wrong? And what has Michigan State feasted on? What has been their sole source of nutrition as a football program since the beginning of the Mark D'Antonio era? Disrespect. It seems like Ohio State is just shoveling the disrespect towards Michigan State with Ryan Day's comfortable resting. Now I'm wondering if it's a trap game.
Ooh, trap game. Going full trap game. No respect for the coaches still on the Ohio State sidelines. That's okay. If you want to do that. Ryan Day did have his radio show on Thursday. He went for about half of it because, again, he's resting. The other half was Kevin Wilson went, and then Larry Johnson went. And so they all had some interesting things to say. Ryan Day said they've shortened the practices, but gone more good on good to keep things sharp. And we don't know how many players are still practicing. We do know that they have not reached that 5% because the game is still on. And I don't know that they're under the 7.5% anymore. Maybe they are back under that, the total population count, because we haven't really heard anything about that other than things sure seem fine now, and there's no cause for concern or no reason to think that there won't be a game. But they certainly have reduced numbers at this point, or else there wouldn't have been this whole panic last week. And so doing more good on good. And if there are, Tom, we have to be so careful about how we do this show. And this is going to be a struggle the entire time about what we can say, what we can't, what we know, what we can't share. The pregame show will be much more informative for you people, I promise. But this good on good thing, say if there were any people out, any starters, who's to say, going good on good then gets any of these backups who have been thrust into a starter's role, it gets them some more experience going against the kind of talent maybe they would see in a game, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to take the training wheels off. If you've got new guys who have not started before, who you're putting in the starting lineup, just you got to throw them in the deep end of the pool. Like, okay, like you don't want to be guiding, be like when you're teaching your kid to ride a bike and you're like holding them as they're riding the bike and they're kind of wobbling, and like you don't want to just do that the whole time and then be like, all right, you're entering a BMX thing this weekend. Like, wait, what? I still can't ride without you holding my shoulder. No, you can't. You got to let go of the back of the bike seat at some point, and and sometimes they're going to fall, and that it's just part of the process. They are, I'm sure, had to get to the point where they had to let go of the bike seat with some guys this week, and that's what's going to get you prepared for this weekend. And I mean, the good news is you're going to have a step down in competition probably this weekend compared to what you're facing in practice, just purely from an overall talent level on these two teams. If you are pick a position group. I won't tell you whether that's someone who is
defensive tackle.
Defensive tackle. If you are a defensive tackle and you have not played before, or not played much before, not started much before, and you are going up against, Wyatt Davis in practice. Wyatt Davis is probably better than any of the guards on the Michigan State team, and I know that because Wyatt Davis is going to be a first-round draft pick in the NFL next spring. So, going against Wyatt Davis, even if you are just getting absolutely mashed into the ground all week in practice, it's like you're swinging the weighted bat on the on deck circle. Well, then you take that off, and all of a sudden, boy, that bat feels lighter, doesn't it? So that's going to maybe be Saturday for some of these guys for Ohio State. And I mean, again, like this is not ideal. None of this is ideal. There's a lot about this whole season that's not ideal, and the way it has come off vis-a-vis the Big Ten, but. This is something that I think I've talked about on the morning show before, but if Ohio State plays a game on Saturday and Ohio State wins the game on Saturday, you as an Ohio State fan should have a big smile on your face at 4:00 on Saturday afternoon. Like, I don't care what the numbers on the scoreboard say. If Ohio State has played and won, that is huge for this program and moves them significantly closer to both a Big Ten and a championship and a college football playoff berth.
Especially when you canceled last week's game, and at that point, nobody had canceled one game and not canceled a second. And so Ohio State being able to play this game as it appears, and every time we say the game on Saturday, just go ahead and throw a mental asterisk on it so that we don't have to throw like an actual one while we're talking, because it delays my train of thought and it wrecks it, and then that's bad for the listener. Worse for me, because then I go on a tangent about something stupid. Like the Simpsons sound effects that Tom was playing for us before the show, which is always great. But Tom, what was I talking about?
Either Argo Ball Girl or Fufra. Not sure which one.
But boy, even when I talk about losing my train of thought, I end up losing my train of thought. So yeah, shortened practices, good on good, getting it, whomever. And I feel like when we start talking about like who's not going to be there or whatever. We need the things that you had in grade school that the girls would make, that with the things that go boom boom, and you pick, and you like, okay, now pick a square. Okay, now pick a
fortune
triangle.
Fortune tellers, yes.
Oh, is that what they're called? And then
yes.
All right, let's talk about linebackers, and then let's talk about this linebacker, and as a hypothetical, rather than saying we're pulling any like actual names. No, this is just a child's paper toy where we're coming up with names. That way we can just clear ourselves of any wrongdoing, which is really my main goal in life. But so a lot of things that Ryan Day talked about. One of the more important things, he was asked if Ohio State would be wearing their all-white unis that they were supposed to wear last week, and the answer is yes.
After Labor Day,
Tom, I think some people call them the icy whites, which was also my band name in high school. We were not very popular.
That you were not one with the icy hot stuntas? No, is that different?
Totally different. Totally different. We were actually a cover band of the icy hot stuntas. So that's that. They'll be wearing the whites. They'll test their last time they test will be Friday night, 8 p.m. You get those results over the course of an hour, testing those 74 players, assuming there's 74 players that are going to travel, and 25 or whatever other people who are traveling. Then they get those results. Then they head off to East Lansing, which is it's a late arrival, but that's the way they do things. But Tom, I figure you get to East Lansing 11 o'clock on Friday night is a lot better than the plan to get to Champaign last week at 8:05 Central Time before what would have been eventually a 3:30 game. But you know, you do what you can to make this work, and there's been so much work to get to this point. Ryan Day said the players don't get enough credit for everything they're doing, and going over late 8 on a Friday night doesn't seem like that big of a sacrifice or trouble when everybody wants to play, is trying to play, and it's just like that's the last hurdle. That's fine.
Well, and what are they going to accomplish by going 2 hours earlier than that? They're just going to be sitting in a hotel room 2 hours longer than they would have otherwise. Like, it's not like, oh, well, we could do some pre-gaming before we head out to the bars in East Lansing. Like, no, that's not going to happen. So you're not leaving at 6 o'clock versus 8 o'clock. Like, you're not accomplishing anything. You're not missing out on a walkthrough at the stadium. You're probably not going to do the walkthrough in the hotel ballroom. I mean, they may not be doing that because why get everyone in the same room and expose everyone to a different room full of air and all of that stuff. So, and these are college kids. They're probably not going to bed at 9:30 on a typical Friday anyway. So that's fine. Like, and we've talked about them being like way out of their normal routine. Like, if they had gone to Illinois at an 8 a.m. flight, like, then you're out of your normal routine because you don't normally fly day of game. And everything is a little bit out of the normal routine this year, but that would have been like extraordinarily out of the normal routine, and you make it work and it's fine. And they probably would have beaten Illinois anyway. But if they can go the night before, you stay in your hotel, you get up in the morning, you have a kind of normal, your day before the game routine is a little thrown off. Your day of game routine is what your normal day of game routine is this year, which is really all that probably functionally matters.
I think maybe the most interesting thing that Day said on the day was he was asked about the secondary and the fixes that had been made, and what that would have looked like last week. And of course they didn't get to show that last week against Illinois, and the secondary was disappointed that they didn't get to do that. And he mentioned that normally after 4 games, you're just getting into like either the last week of September or the first week of October. Here now, it is going to be we're early December here, and at this point, true freshmen should be almost sophomores in a normal season. By December, like, think Chris Olave as a true freshman. He was a viable sophomore by the end of his freshman year. Garrett Wilson as well. And you have these freshmen in the secondary that he was asked about, and it's like, well, they're not sophomores yet because you don't really become like this experienced freshman after just 4 games when they really haven't played. But then he mentioned people will need to step up because of possible issues, issues we know of in the secondary, and because there may be roles that they have to step into because people may be out, implying that perhaps, somebody's going to have to step up in the secondary, or saying it. And so that was interesting to me, and I don't know that we should really speculate much about it, but that was what I took from the radio show. Just, maybe we should delete this entirely because I don't know where we go from here, but it goes into what he's been saying all along. Freshmen have to be ready to step up, and everybody has to be ready to step up. If you have somebody in front of you, you need to be ready to play. And it sure seems like this is the week that the talk stops being the talk, because we hear it every week from every coach. This week, we have to see it in action, and we will see it. And if it doesn't go well, it may not go well.
Well, yeah, this is the Ohio State next man up idea that they have put forth. This is not like just a this year thing. This is something that goes back to Urban Meyer. I mean, it probably goes back to Jim Tressel. I mean, it's just like next man up. Like, if you are playing football, if you are on the roster at Ohio State, you have to be ready to play. You have to be ready, if your name is called, to step in and do the job. And before this year, there was a lot of talk that, well, boy, this is especially true this year. And that, you really never know. You have to be ready to go every play because you don't know. You have to be prepared every week as if you're going to be starting because you just don't know. Normally the concern is injury. This year, the concern could be like, yeah, there might just be like a decent chunk of starters who just aren't going to play this week because of COVID. And that's been a concern. It's been something that Ryan Day's been preaching since June. And this is the week that, okay, yep, let's see if everyone was listening. Let's see where everyone really stands. Cause again, we're not going to get into specifics, but there will be someone who has to make a first time start on Saturday. There may be more than one someone's who has to make a first time start on Saturday. And you are at the point in the season where, you listen to the way they talk about things on the college football playoff selection show. And Ohio State does not have the luxury of losing a game as people are sort of figuring stuff out. Like they don't necessarily need to win by 1,000,000 points on Saturday, but they need to win. They're not going to get the same level of grace that Clemson was granted for not having Trevor Lawrence and not having a couple defensive players at Notre Dame and losing. I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. One of which is Clemson has a much bigger body of work this year. One of which is Michigan State is not Notre Dame, despite what you may think.
Nobody thinks that, Tom.
Nobody. No. Well,
no.
Is there a Michigan State version of Rutgers Owl? I don't know. Maybe someone thinks that. I don't know. But yeah, you're not going to get the level of grace that Clemson has been granted if you lose a game. So you can't lose a game, and that means that the next man up in whatever spot or spots that ends up being on Saturday has to be able to be at least functional, because the margin for error for Ohio State is not super tiny. Ohio State can play a not very good game and still out talent Michigan State, because Michigan State is not going to be able to run the ball all that well. Michigan State has a very erratic passing game. So, I don't think there's a real good chance that Michigan State hangs 40 points on this Ohio State defense, no matter who is there or who isn't there on Saturday. But, you're going to have to make some plays on offense. You're going to have to get some stops on defense. And that means that the guys who are doing it for the first time are going to have to do it. And, we've talked all year about this being a year that's like the ultimate measuring stick of culture and programs. And, the programs with the strong cultures are going to be the ones that come through this. Let's see what the Ohio State culture about next man up. Let's see if it's as legit as they preach that it is.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. I like to see new guys emerge. That's one of my favorite things about college football, except you normally don't see that in December. You see that in September when it's a new team and, oh, look, here's the new guy. And then now you get to this point, you basically know everything you need to know about the team, except that's not the case at all this year, not just for us, but for the coaches. And they're trying to figure this out. And I guess the good thing, if there are starters missing, the new people will have Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday practices and the Friday walkthrough to get ready to take over those roles. Ryan Day mentioned that, you planned for this. They have planned for this. And you have to have a plan A and a plan B. And then he also said, but then you also have a plan C and plan D because things happen in bunches. And those are basically his words. Like, especially this year, if you get a little bit of an outbreak, it becomes a little bit more of an outbreak. And that's when, now we've got to handle this, and this is an issue. And so, yeah, plan A and plan B isn't enough. And it's just interesting to see him almost open up as to, what's going on behind the scenes other than this day. But of course he won't. But like the fact that you're like, well, you need 4 plans. It's like, whoa, yeah, what? How? That's a lot, man. But not 4 at every position. Or, all right, I'm going to stop there, Tom. I'm going to transition to something else before I say something I shouldn't. He mentioned he was asked about Marcus Crowley, and he said his knee is almost where it needs to be to get out there and start playing again. We knew he was off the availability list 2 weeks ago. The last time we had an availability list, we thought, would we see him? It sounds like he's still not. While he's available, there's no reason to put him out there right now and in a situation where they would need him. Day mentioned Master Teague. They've kind of discovered or figured out what he does best this season, so they're doing more of that, and that's why you're seeing improve production out of him. I think we'll continue to see that with Trey Sermon as well as this running game gets better. The running game is going to be key this week, Tom, because you're talking about there's momentum with it right now, and this is a Michigan State defense that's always solid against the run, even when they're bad. They're still not necessarily easy to run on, and so it will be interesting to see if they can run it with just the running backs, or does Justin Fields have to be involved for another 70 yards or so? Is that what this offense now becomes? As there is pressure, while we're not talking about style points, there is pressure on the Ohio State offense to continue to look good, because that is what has kept them ahead of Texas A&M at this point, according to Gary Barta, the chair of the committee. And so if this offense struggles for whatever reason, now you're making Texas A&M and Ohio State even closer. Then you're getting to the point where Ohio State needs that Big Ten championship to put them over the edge. But the running game is going to be key Saturday, because they need that offense to continue to look good and to impress the committee.
Yeah, if the Ohio State team can run the ball on Saturday, that probably tells you that they're going to win the game. Because if they can run the ball, that tells you the offensive line is getting a decent push. You've got some guys at the running back position who are doing what they need to do. And if you can run the ball in Michigan State, that opens up the passing game. So if they can run the ball, if Ohio State's running the ball for like 5 yards a carry on Saturday, they're winning the game. And they're probably winning the game somewhat comfortably. That's a pretty good metric for what, if you tell me this stat, I will tell you what I think the score is. If Ohio State's running the ball for 5 yards a carry, I think there's a pretty good chance Ohio State wins the game by, a couple touchdowns, 20 points, something like that. If another one of those is, so what's Rocky Lombardi's yards per completion attempt, or large yards per completion average, or yards per attempt average? Because I think that the path for Michigan State to be able to get a win, or at least keep this pretty close, is hitting some big plays in the pass game. And that's kind of what they did against Michigan. That's what Indiana did against Ohio State. When they can't do it, when they're inconsistent in that pass game, you've seen some real ugly games from Michigan State this year. When Rocky Lombardi's completing 40% of his passes and they're not hitting the big ones, that's when they lose. What was it, 49-7 against Iowa, something like that. They could have a real clunker in them this weekend. If Ohio State can run the ball, if Ohio State can stop Michigan State in the passing game, either of those is probably fine. And if Ohio State can just throw the ball explosively instead of run the ball consistently, that's probably fine too. If they keep Michigan State from throwing the ball, they're probably in decent shape, no matter who's playing or who isn't.
Yeah, I was just actually looking at my rundown from this, because I recall Larry Johnson saying that Rocky Lombardi throws a really good deep ball, and I'm like, does he? And then now I'm reading my recap, and it just says, the thing is, Rocky Lombardi throws a really deep ball. I left out the good part, maybe subliminally. I left out, it's he does throw a really deep ball, Tom. We've seen that, where he just, I'm just going to throw this thing deep. And then, of course, Michigan's cornerbacks give up the catches. And the difference this week is we'll see, will Ohio State's secondary stop those? And as Rocky Lombardi, if there's one thing Rocky Lombardi does, he throws a really deep ball. Nobody knows where it's going. And it might, that's why it's a good thing that there's fewer people on the sidelines this year. The cameramen, somebody could be hurt with some of these deep throws that he likes to throw up there. Kevin Wilson, I mentioned we talked to, he is going to be on the sideline this week, and instead of up in the box. And he talked about he did that half of his career as the OC at Oklahoma, so he's accustomed to that, and obviously did it his entire career as the head coach at Indiana when he would be calling plays there. So that won't be an issue for him. He did mention he wants to be able to look Justin Fields in the eye on certain play calls, and the fact that he mentioned that he wants to, he will be looking face to face with Justin Fields. Make of that what you will on who's going to play. So
he didn't say Justin Fields. He said Justin.
Oh.
So I suggested on Twitter that he might be coaching the linebackers, and I've been talking about Justin Hilliard. Someone suggested to me that maybe Justin Hilliard was getting moved to tight end. These are all, I think you're making some assumptions here.
You're right.
Is all I'm saying.
he could maybe Justin Arns, Buckeye guard for the basketball team, is shadowing Kevin Wilson this week. You know, I don't think that would be safe, although everybody gets tested. So who knows? You're right. He could be talking about anybody. Maybe he has a imaginary emotional support friend named Justin. And
if ever there's a week when you would need one, here we are.
Yes, this is that week. Wilson said life is basically like a game plan. You prepare and then you adjust, and that's what they've had to do this year. He also mentioned, like, before this year, I had no idea what Zoom was, and now I am burnt out on it. And
same.
Just join the rest of the company. Because I remember when looking for podcasts, like, how do you record? People say, try Zoom, try this. And like, Zoom, no need for that. And then here we are every day, 3 hours a day.
I saw a great tweet, and probably back in about April or so, that was Skype blew a 3-1 lead. And yep. Yep, sure did.
Howdy. They sure did. One of the things Kevin Wilson said is anybody can lead when it's 72 degrees and sunny. Real leaders lead when it's, things aren't going well. And that's when he was asked, so are you going to be on the field or are you going to be in the box? He's like, I'll be down in the field. And that's when it was mentioned, like, well, it won't be 72 and sunny down there. And like, yeah, thanks for reminding me of that. He's got to get his foot warmers and he's got to be ready for the cold because, Tom, there's a lot of, between me and you, like, you're out on the field a lot in the cold. I try not to go down there where it's cold. And so we can both appreciate Kevin Wilson here being like, yes, I will have to give up the comfort of the press box to go down to the cold field. And I feel for him a little bit. You probably don't. You're probably like, yeah, what's the big deal?
Toughen up, man. Toughen up. Coaching the Big Ten long enough, you should be used to this by now. One thing I do want to clarify, you mentioned earlier, you said, just kind of like casually said, yeah, when we were talking to Kevin Wilson, and we weren't talking to Kevin Wilson. Kevin Wilson has not been made available to us. Larry Johnson has not been made available to us. Ryan Day has not been made available to us. This was all the coach's show, which is, let's call it a tightly controlled environment. That if they don't want to answer your question, they don't have to answer your question. So we have had no media availability at all this week. Now that's something that is, probably something that's worth just sort of keeping in mind, like, as you're trying to puzzle out, like, okay, how different are things this week? We've got no one we've talked to. There have been no, outside of the radio show, there's been no on the record comments from anyone about anything with regard to this. And a lot of that, I think, is they don't want to get into the specifics of who's playing or have anyone say anything that they don't want them to say. So, and a lot of that goes into why tell Michigan State that this guy is playing or this guy isn't playing and let them game plan around that before you absolutely have to. We're supposed to get a availability report Saturday morning. Normally we get that Friday morning. They're going to do it Saturday morning. Just why give Michigan State a day to know that fill in the blank guy is or is not playing? So that's if you were looking for any indication that this is a little bit of a different, unusual kind of week, there's one of them right there.
Yeah, and just so people don't think we're letting people know that Ohio State may have people not playing, Ryan Day himself said the team would be, quote, a little shorthanded this week. And again, they had a game canceled last week, so it's not like things are great. There are issues, and so us discussing those issues doesn't give Michigan State any advantage. But we know, Tom, coaches, we know Ohio State, Ryan Day listens to the show. Perhaps now Mel Tucker listens to the show, and I think I know how that happened because Day said that Mel Tucker called him when he found out about Day coming down with the COVID, and so called him to wish him well. And I'm sure Tucker was like, so what are you going to be doing? And he's like, well, I'll be resting comfortably and listening to Buckeye Weekly. And Mel Tucker's like, listening to what? And then, it's these two guys. They're really intelligent and they know what they're talking about. And Tucker, like, can you send me some info? And Ryan Day would be like, no, you can just Google it. And Tucker would be like, Google what? Can you just text? Can you mail a letter to me with the information? Because is this on the internet? And then Ryan Day explains to him what the internet is. And then Kevin Wilson's like, hey, have you guys heard about Zoom? And then,
I got to tell you, that whole thing that read much more as a Mark D'Antonio conversation than the inner what now? Who? What? Is that where the disrespect?
Off my lawn.
Is that where the disrespect lives? And the answer, of course, is yes. Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's good. Kevin Wilson said that this is as good a tight end group as he's ever had, and I believe him there. He obviously loves those guys. That's why they get 2 passes a game. That's a joke. They get more than that. That was just. He did mention like Luke Farrell was the offensive player of the game, the game before without catching a pass, just to give you an idea of how important and how talented he is. And stopping, I think he said helping out on the 87,000 Indiana blitzes. That was his number. So Kevin Wilson will be helped out. And it was interesting. He talked about, well, how are things going to be with you and Larry Johnson on like 4th downs and things like that. And he mentioned that when it starts to get down to 4th down territory, like on the plus side of the field, you're talking about that 2 or 3, 4 plays in advance. That way, you know how to call the plays. Like if you know you've got a 4th down, you can run it on like 3rd and 6 and stuff like that. So they start talking about it before then. That he and Larry Johnson will discuss that. And then when it comes down to, any other 4th down decision or whatever, then that's going to be Larry Johnson's decision. But he and Kevin Wilson will obviously be talking about that. And that's one of those things where for any defensive head coach would ask the offensive coordinator, like, how has this been going in practice? How confident are you? How confident is the quarterback in running it? And if everything is checks all along, then okay, we'll do it. The other thing, Larry Johnson doesn't have to worry about being fired for this game, so maybe he can be a little bit more aggressive. But you also, who knows what this line, what these lineups are going to look like? So how do you even want to be aggressive, or do you want to be aggressive because of what you got? I don't know, Tom, and I know you would be aggressive, but just be careful is all I'm saying. That's all I'm telling you. Just be careful.
Well, and I think a lot of these decisions are probably getting made, just like in a normal week, they're probably getting made now because the coaching staff knows exactly who is and isn't going to be there, barring some kind of change in the testing on Friday. So at that point, hey, we have these guys, we don't have these guys. So maybe our offense is going to be reasonably okay, but maybe the defense might be a little tougher. So maybe if you have more faith in your offense, you are a little more aggressive there, or vice versa. If, hey, the defense is pretty much intact and they've played pretty well today and we think they've had a good week of practice and the offense is missing a bunch of guys, like maybe you kind of play a little more conservatively and rely on that defense. And like I said, those are decisions that are, those are decisions that will get made on Saturday, but there's a decent chance that, at this point they have decided, like, look, if it's 4th and less than 4 and, inside the plus 40, we're going for it no matter what. And, that's fine. And that's information that they have all of the data you would need to make that decision right now. And, so you don't, yes, this is going to be challenging for Larry Johnson. I'm sure that this is not, go for it on 4th down is not something Larry Johnson spends any time thinking about during a normal game or during a normal week of game prep. Like that is the furthest thing from his mind. So I'm sure he will be leaning a little bit on Kevin Wilson and those guys. But, when you go for a punt block, that kind of stuff, like this is all stuff that they I'm sure are kind of sorting out right now. Put that stuff in. Hey, do you want to do some kind of crazy onside kick at some point? Do you have the whatever the updated version of the Maryland onside kick from last year was, where just like, yep, just a cool, crazy onside kick, just throw it in the second quarter at some point. Like they'll get all that stuff sorted out. I do think they probably will play somewhat close to the vest this weekend and just sort of, rely on that talent advantage they have. You have, regardless of how many people are out, they have better talent across the field than Michigan State does. Rely on that talent advantage and, just sort of, basically shorten the game as much as possible. Just kind of go, you just don't put yourself in a position where you can make the big mistake, force Michigan State to drive the field, force Michigan State to do it the tough way. Don't set them up for something easy.
this being Michigan State, just win the surest way. Because there have been other games that went poorly against Michigan State when it shouldn't have, with a much more talented Ohio State team than a Michigan State team. So just win the surest way. And just so people are clear, like Ryan Day is totally involved in all of this. He's just doing it from home with all of these Zoom meetings. So it's not like when the cat is away, the mice will play. And fourth down, we're going for it. Fourth in our own on our own 22, we're going for it. It's not, and it's also not like other coaches where Larry Johnson is the substitute teacher and everybody else is just trying to get away with stuff. It's like, let's just force him into going for it, and then we'll switch our chairs around. He won't know who's who. Stuff like didn't you ever do that, Tom? Substitute teachers?
Constantly. When Larry Johnson was subbing in with my 11th grade astronomy class, yes, we just constantly, yeah.
There is no way you had astronomy in 7th grade.
11th grade.
7th grade. 11th grade. Did I? I don't know. I had it as a freshman in college.
Yeah,
astronomy seems like a pretty worthless thing for high school, though. But did you go to a city high school or a country high school?
Kind of in between.
That's city.
And it's
country.
It was
astronomy class in country school. That's the sun. That's the moon. Astronomy.
Yeah, and boy, high school was quite a while ago. Now that I'm thinking back on it, I'm like, it was like half of a year was astronomy, but I don't remember what the other half of
geology
that year was. Maybe. I mean, biology, chemistry,
funnily
physics.
Enough, yeah. Our geology final, that was just it. Maybe. And then, because we're country school. Rocks.
What's a crick? That has nothing to do with geology.
No, Tom. Don't make fun of cricks. That's it. Now I'm angry. Now you're making fun of real things, real important things. But let's get back to less important things, football and the coronavirus. Tom, you talked to the Big Ten about contact tracing. Can you go over that and let us know what's going on there?
Yeah, so contact tracing, I'm assuming people have had at least some chance to run into this in their day-to-day lives. But basically, contact tracing is if someone around you tests positive and you have been in close proximity to them, and the rules seem like they change slightly every 5 minutes, but it's if you were less than 6 feet away for more than 15 minutes, something like that, you are going to isolate yourself on the idea that maybe you got it and maybe you didn't. And under the CDC's guidelines, up until this week, if you contact traced to someone, you had to quarantine for 14 days. And the Big Ten followed that CDC guidance. So if you were, let's just say you were a player in a position group and you had been sitting in a meeting with someone else who has tested positive, then you have to basically treat yourself as if you are positive for that 14 days. You don't have that additional 7-day ramp-up period where you've heard the Big Ten talk about the 21 days. If you test positive, you got 14 days of quarantine and then 7 days of ramp-up. If you're contact traced, you have to sit out for 14 days. Then you can go back in. So functionally, what that means is guys who were contact traced the day before the Illinois game could be back for what is presumably the Michigan game next week. If you tested positive, you would miss another week. You'd miss that Michigan game. If it was just contact traced, you could be back for Michigan. Now, on Wednesday night this week, the CDC changed its guidance on that. So instead of 14 days, now it's 10 days of being in quarantine, or 7 days if you have a negative test at the end of that to show, really, I don't have it. The Big Ten followed the CDC guidance initially. The Big Ten could change that guidance. It would require the medical subcommittee to vote on that and to approve that change. To date, as of 5:30 on Thursday afternoon when we're recording that has not happened yet that we are aware of. It's possible that could change. If that changes before this week, what that could mean is that the guys who were contact traced a week ago for Ohio State on Friday before that Illinois game, if they pass a test on Friday this week, that would be 7 days in a negative test, and then they can presumably play this weekend. But that requires, number one, the Big Ten to make that change, the medical subcommittee to vote for that, and number two, those guys to have those negative tests. So that could change this week. If that doesn't change this week and it changes next week, that could impact Michigan, and maybe that makes it more likely that Michigan, if Michigan has guys sitting out for contact tracing, that maybe Michigan could play next week if they wouldn't normally be able to. Because the guys who have tested positive and they're missing 3 weeks. That's just where it is right now, unless they change that rule, and there's no indication they're changing that rule. Unless they change that rule, they're missing Illinois, Michigan State, Michigan, the guys who tested positive last Friday. So again, like it's that was a lot. Like, and I realized that was a lot.
I'm following it, so that's good. If I can follow it,
that's good. Yeah, this is all stuff that I think we have all sort of run into in our day-to-day lives. Like, oh crap, someone I know has tested positive, and now you're in this weird limbo for a while, and you wait and you see if you've developed symptoms, and you have to wait 10 days now, and all of that. So I think people have probably run into this enough in their day-to-day lives that they probably have some sense for it. So the short version of it is, so far it's 14 days for the Big Ten. That's because it followed CDC guidance. CDC guidance literally just changed yesterday. So it's possible the Big Ten could change to follow the new CDC guidance, but it hasn't happened yet. If it happens this week, it would be big for Ohio State going into the Michigan State game because they get more guys back. If it happens next week, it could be big for Michigan in terms of getting guys back and maybe being able to play that game.
And really, there is no reason not to do it because they based their initial rules on the CDC guidelines then. And it wouldn't take long to rule it. You just get, 12 people or whatever, or however many on that subcommittee on Zoom. And within an hour, then you can just vote on it and it's done. And because it's not like, well, we got to go to the congressman and get this written up. And then, but Congress is off this month. So then, it's not, it's just people getting on a Zoom call and saying, let's do it. This makes sense. And getting it done. I don't see it not happening. And it could happen tomorrow. It could happen Friday. I don't see why it wouldn't soon because there's no reason to wait.
Yeah. And I mean, if you want to get a little bit conspiratorial and we can get into the potential changes to the minimum game rule as well. But, I mean, there have been a lot of people saying, oh, the Big Ten's just doing this to help Ohio State. Like, well, I mean, if players don't have to sit out and miss games so they don't have to miss, like, that seems pretty win-win, and that's going to benefit Ohio State, and that's going to benefit literally everyone else who has players sitting out right now who are not positive, who could follow the CDC guidelines and test out of it. So that does seem pretty win-win. And, it makes, if Ohio State and Michigan can play next weekend, who that makes real happy? The good folks at the Fox Television Network, who really, that is, they pay a little bit of extra every year to have the first pick of which week they get the first pick. So, and every year that extra money that they spend is so that they can televise the Ohio State Michigan game. That's why it's on Fox every year, because Fox pays more money than ABC, ESPN does. So guess what Fox really wants to have happen next weekend? I'm going to spoil it for you. It's the Ohio State Michigan game.
Oh, that's right.
And it for a conference that is full of schools that have all lost a whole lot of money. I mean, everyone's in kind of a tens of millions of dollars hole this year. You want to keep those revenue generating partners as happy as you possibly can. So it is in the Big Ten's best interest to make sure that game gets played. And, it's in the Big Ten's best interest to not have Ohio State get hosed out of a college football playoff berth or a Big Ten championship game berth on a technicality that was sort of arbitrarily set before the season.
And you think Fox paying however many extra millions to get this game, if Michigan can't play and Ohio State ends up playing like Nebraska, who I think is scheduled to maybe play Minnesota the final week, and we don't know if Minnesota can go. So this is like Fox paying millions for a rematch, or like when Homer, all he wanted to do was like one day own an NFL team, and then finally he gets one given to him, and it's the Denver Broncos. Like, oh, the Denver Broncos. Of course, this was when they were, I think, losing Super Bowls at that time because the show's been on forever. But this would be not quite what Fox thought they were getting. So I do believe Fox is kind of they've gotten involved before in terms of trying to get the season started. So and these are business partners, and I wonder, they've already changed the kickoff of the Big Ten championship game. It was going to be 8, now it's noon. We still have no idea what championship week is going to look like outside of that championship game. I'm still wondering if Ohio State isn't in the championship game. Is Ohio State and Wisconsin, like the 8 p.m. game or whatever? But that takes us into then the next rule that may be getting changed, or it looks like it will be getting changed, the 6-game minimum to play in the Big Ten championship game. From what we've been told, that's going to be wiped out. That's going to be changed. And I don't know that there will be a minimum, or they'll just change it to 5 games, so that Ohio State can get in there. But from what we've been told, that 6-game mandate is going to go away. And that's another thing like the other rule. It just takes the Zoom call, because it's just the athletic directors getting together and saying, yeah, we would like to give our best team the best shot to make the playoffs, so that then we can all reap the benefits of that.
Well, I'm going to throw this out there for you. Who was the person who talked to the Detroit News, who was quoted about this, who was started this ball rolling publicly?
Barry Alvarez.
Barry Alvarez, who is the athletic director of
Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. And Wisconsin has played even fewer games than Ohio State this year, and right now is tied in the loss column with Northwestern. So if Northwestern loses another game and Wisconsin wins out, then Wisconsin would stand to benefit from this rule as well. So my suspicion is that Barry Alvarez, who is one of, if not the most powerful athletic directors in the Big Ten right now, will probably be lobbying for the rule to get dropped completely, rather than just for it to get lowered by another game, which would all still leave Wisconsin potentially sitting on the sidelines. That's my working theory.
Well,
your thoughts?
As long as Wisconsin plays 2 more games, they'll play as many as Ohio State, right? Because they're 3-1, 2-1 right now. So they would still have,
I think, yeah.
They'd have 5 games like Ohio State would, right? If they play these next 2 weeks.
Yes, I think. Yes, they played one less game than Ohio State. So yes.
But in theory, they would catch up next week with Ohio State's 5 games.
But if they miss a game,
yes,
and Northwestern loses a game,
you're saying.
So I'm saying it would not completely shock me if this got switched to no minimum, because why bother? And Northwestern has Illinois next week. Who do they have this week?
Canceled. Minnesota.
Okay. So yeah. So again, you're relying on Illinois to beat Northwestern, but on the other hand, you're relying on Northwestern to win a big football game. So I'm not sure what to put any faith in next week.
They lost to Michigan State. They can lose to Illinois for sure. We know that. I imagine the meetings, Barry Alvarez is just like, we got to do this for Ohio State, you guys. We got to do this for the Buckeyes. We got to do this for the Big Ten. Get the Buckeyes there. And meanwhile, he's just like, let's get rid of that. We should probably just get rid of the minimum too. And then,
what if games played in Evanston don't count? I'm just saying, like, it's close to the lake. I don't know, man. I don't think they should count.
Yeah, so I don't think Buckeye fans should have to worry anymore about the Big Ten championship game unless they lose these next 2 games. And then, of course, there is they can still back their way in, but at that point, you're probably not going to go to the playoffs.
The college football playoff implications are slightly less at that point. I'm going to go out on a limb and predict Ohio State to win at least one of the next 2 games that they play. But, maybe that's me being biased. I don't know.
Realist, perhaps, as well, maybe.
I mean, Ohio State was, I think they're a 24-point favorite, I think, against Michigan State in 1998 as well. Tom. What could possibly go wrong?
Possibly go wrong. So let's end by talking about Warde Manuel, Michigan athletic director, who was seething in his anger that Kirk Herbstreit would insinuate that Michigan might skip out next week to skip out on the Ohio State game and not have to play the Buckeyes. And frankly, when I heard this from Kirk Herbstreit, I was stunned, because he's the only person I've ever heard say that this might be a possibility that Michigan would do this. Clearly, I don't think the Wolverines would ever do this, because, obviously they want to play this game. They're competitors. They want to win. It is pretty funny though that within, I don't know, a day after Herbstreit saying this, and then of course apologizing, Michigan had to shut stuff down. The game got canceled, basically. So I wonder, and I don't think he will, because he likes to be America's, friend. Like, if Michigan does cancel next week, does he pat himself on the back on Twitter? He doesn't, but I know there are plenty of people who would. would just like dance on Michigan's grave for that one and just have at it. But it is something to watch. I hope they don't have to cancel that game. It is college football. It's give us this game, this 2020 season. Just we're not asking for much.
I mean, you go back and listen to our shows over the summer, and I think probably one or both of us both said, hey, if there is an Ohio State Michigan game this year, I would take that, and like whatever else happens, that's fine. But like, if I would like there to be an Ohio State Michigan game, because that is just such a, that's just like a touchstone of the whole year. It is one of the most exciting and memorable weeks of the year in Columbus. It's something that, if you go back, I could probably give you the scores of every Michigan Ohio State game off the top of my head, going back to, I don't know, the 70s at least. Like, what was the Penn State score in 2014? Like, I could not tell you with a gun to my head. Yeah. And you're making the squinting thinking face, which
24-21. I don't, was that the block? No, that wasn't
that was the blocked field goal game. That was 16. So yeah, exactly. So this is the game that everyone in Columbus waits all year for. This is the game that is, voted the number one game in the ESPN Sports Century poll at the end of the 90s, that literally the greatest rivalry in all of sports, period. End of, like, not like, biggest rivalry in the Big Ten or college football or no, in all of sports. So yeah, I mean, you obviously want to see that game happen. And yeah, I think, it has, I think it's been funny for people to, kind of joke that, haha, Michigan players are just going around like licking doorknobs right now, trying desperately. Like, I don't think they're trying to get out of it. I think they're, was Ohio State ducking Illinois? No. I mean, they just stuff. Probably not.
Thank you.
It's I don't think Maryland was ducking Ohio State. I don't think Ohio State was ducking Illinois, and I don't think Michigan, if that game doesn't happen next week, Michigan will be ducking Ohio State. And that was one of those things where, like, he said it, and I was like, I must not have heard that correctly. And I logged on Twitter, and there's a bunch of people going, "Did he just say?" I was like, "Oh no, that is in fact what I heard." Yeah, and then he doubled down on it. It was like, that was a choice.
It was very Feinbaum or Clay Travis or just personality.
Yeah, it was. I think, and he came out and put out like a hostage video later that
newspaper showing today's date.
Yeah, I mean, do you remember the picture of him when he was sitting on a set and there was an earthquake and he had this face that was like, oh man, you could tell that was his internal monologue, was that face. So, I mean, yeah, I think I'm very hopeful that there will be an Ohio State Michigan game next week. We have talked about the fact that, that's a week we normally do a daily podcast for. We do Buckeye Weekly every single day of the Michigan week because, normally that's Thanksgiving week, but that's the thing. We don't do that for Penn State. We don't do that for, a big out of conference game like Oregon or Oklahoma. Like, we do that for Michigan week because it is a Michigan week. And so it would really be too bad if that game doesn't happen, because, Ohio State, Nebraska part 2 doesn't quite have the same juice as the Michigan game. No,
and I seem to recall the second schedule that was put out this year. Not the original, but the makeup, just conference only, had that Michigan game in the middle of the season, October 24th, I think. That way, it could be played eventually. If it couldn't be played on the 24th, there was enough time to move it and then catch up and play it. And that's just one more, kick in the teeth, or another example of the Big Ten being stupid about this or incorrect. Overly cautious, I think, is okay to be, but they were incorrect about how to start this. And it's cost them games and cost them revenue, and that's not the only measure, but if it costs them the Michigan-Ohio State game, that's something significant, and it didn't have to come to that, and it still might, and that's too bad. But Tom, in this house, we are going to operate as though the Michigan game is happening, until I turn on my TV, or no, I'll be at the game, or I'll show up at Ohio Stadium for next Saturday's game. And if nobody else is there, then I guess the game isn't happening. And people can tell me it's canceled. I ain't gonna believe it. I'm still gonna go and be like, they're gonna show up. Something's gonna happen here. Come on. Since 1918, Tom.
Sound of glass breaking. Oh God, that's Jim Harbaugh's music.
I knew it.
This would be quite a heel turn. Scott Frost has already done this to Michigan once in 1997, where Michigan thought, oh, this is it, and then Scott Frost came in and stole their nice crystal football for the national championship. And boy, if Scott Frost steals the game away from them this year, that boy, I don't think he'll be a popular figure in Ann Arbor.
Do we have anything else, Tom? Did you have anything you wanted to add before we get out of here? It's Thursday.
Well, we'll have a pregame show on Saturday morning, which
that's going to be doozy. That's probably going to be an hour long.
I was going to say we normally go like half an hour or so on those pregame shows. Like, I don't know. I'm assuming we're going to get that availability report, the official one, on Saturday morning around 10. That's typically when those come out. So, as soon as that happens, we will do I'm going to say extensive pregame show, extremely extensive pregame show.
And live for everybody to watch and contribute to.
We typically do those on YouTube. You can find those on youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. That's, sometimes we go into those and it's like, oh, what are we going to talk about for the game? Like, no. I know what we're going to talk about. There's going to be some stuff to talk about. And This is on Friday's morning show. I have on Rodney Dunnigan from ABC6, who is one of the hosts of the Football Fever show. And one of the things I asked him about, and one of the reasons I wanted to have him on Friday, is like, okay, you're the guy who has to do the hour-long TV show about the Ohio State-Michigan State game, and it starts at 11 a.m., and you're only going to have the official report on who's playing and who's not, which is going to completely change everything, like a little before then, maybe. And, if Ohio State didn't release a pregame availability report at all, would that completely shock me? No. But, what is that like? How do you do that? We previewed the game as well, but this is going to be an interesting one. I'm really looking forward to that. And we might just go an hour and a half, like start at 10:30, go right up till kickoff. Like what? There's going to be a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I am. Sadistically, I'm looking forward to it. I don't know. I just, it's going to be very interesting. There's going to be many ways to look at it and names to talk about. And we will do it then, because if we did it now, Tom, it would not be good.
We would get a 5-star review from Mel Tucker and a 1-star review from Ryan Day.
And we don't like those 1-star reviews, especially the ones that are mean to us, along with the 1-star review. Like, just leave your 1-star review and go. Don't tell us why you don't like us. Although my least favorite was the one who was like, I love your show, 1-star review. What?
I'm not sure you understand the scale. Would you like to try again? We got a 3-star review recently that complained about the commercial mix on the show, that there was a commercial for JCPenney in Spanish during the show. It's like, that's not up to us. That's up to the good folks at the advertising places. So you should leave us a 5-star review and say how great we are and how you really just listen for the commercials. That would just fill my heart with so much joy if we had just a bunch of 5-star reviews talking about how great the commercials are.
Or anything. And just tell us how your day's going. 5-star review. Had meatloaf tonight. It was great. 5-star review. And just,
leave that recipe. Yeah, exactly. Leave the recipe in the ratings. Yeah. And
anywhere else you go where you get tremendous service, or you've had a great day and you want to leave them a 5-star review, give it to us.
or review the restaurant, like, hey, the pizza shop in my town, 5 stars. Really like how Tom and Tony break down the Ohio State.
What? Yes. Review other places on their sites and then mention us.
There you go.
Perfect. I love it. And so, gosh, that's a great idea. So Tom already mentioned, check out Morning Scoop in the morning with Rodney Dunnigan. That'll be a good listen, good watch. Either one, however you view the medium. And Tom, from my understanding, people is watching lots of videos now.
People is watching lots of videos.
I made you say it.
And here's my suggestion to you. You don't have to choose to watch or listen. You can do both. Or you can try and sync it up. Like do like the Dark Side of the Moon Wizard of Oz thing and sync up your podcast player with your YouTube and sync it up and then be like, wow, it is so trippy. He's talking here and it's coming out there. Oh man. I mean, people are looking for ways to, pass the time. That's just saying, maybe that's something to explore.
I think you've just discussed stereo. So you know what, Tom, let's just go before you tell people
5 stars, incredible sonic experience.
I was also high. All right. That'll do it. Thank you all for listening. We will talk to you guys on Saturday for a very long time. And so we'll do it then. We got to go. Have a good day. We'll see you guys later.